March. With me in studio, Yossi Yonah, former MK with Israel's Labor Party, and Jeremy Saltan, political consultant, former candidate with the right-wing Yamina list. Yossi, a big highlight today of the drama is Lieberman's speech and his attacks on the ultra-Orthodox, really personal cutting attacks. Do you think he went too far? Do you think it was even anti-Semitic? And does it hurt the discourse of the country?
Well, before referring to this specific thing, let us put it that way. It is not that we're facing up no elections. We are doomed to have a third election, and this is very bad. And I think that we have to express, our disappointment that this is what's going to happen. So we are again we are heading towards third election inescapably, and I think that what the Lieberman's speech actually sealing this issue. Third, what we see here is that Netanyahu gave this speech and putting a lot of pressure on Lieberman. This is, I think, the serious part of the speech. There is a not serious part of the speech, which is the blame game that it continues on. So because just listen to the we were listening to the speech, and it was kind of espousing a very right-wing agenda. So which means that, and this agenda, it is impossible to have the blue and right coming up into a coalition. So but at the end of the speech, he does speak about, or he did speak about Gantz, about, well, look, we've got some time, let's do something about that. But of course, given that he's espousing a very right-wing agenda, there's nothing to talk about, which means that the main pressure is putting on Lieberman, saying, well, there still might be a possibility of forming a new right government.
Yeah, he's saying, let's get this done even tonight. Jeremy, is there a possibility that in the next 21 days before this third election would be triggered, that something dramatic could happen? I mean, we only need a handful of breakaways, either from the center-left coalition, just a handful, or even on the Likud side, if Lieberman, it could happen, but do you think it will happen, or, as Yossi eloquently put it, are we doomed to yet another one of these elections?
I'm not willing to accept doom yet, Jeff. I think, though, we have to recognize this is a historic day. For the first time since Israel's establishment, we are going to get to a point where the second mandate is going to expire tonight at midnight. And we're going to go ahead and go through this 21 days. And there's no historical precedent, so no one can go ahead and point to any case study and tell us what's going to happen. Right. What I do think will happen, though, is we have to look at the fact that right now Likud is the largest party. They're the largest faction. They had the most recommendations, and they have the largest bloc. They're just missing 6 seats. I do think if we look at Netanyahu's speech, he's very clearly directing that to one person, and that's to Lieberman. And if Lieberman does move over, there is a stable government of 63 MKs. So I do think over the next 21 days, that is going to be what the discussion is.
Lieberman could have done this at any point over the last year. I mean, he has maintained this independent streak, refusing to go back to the right-wing and religious party bloc. Why would that change now, after today's speech? Why would that change?
My thought is like this. We're going to have a lot of polls taken out now. And people are going to, I think the politicians are going to see what I think the three of us at least know in the studio, and that's that the Israeli people don't want a third election.
Well, who's to blame?
And then they will look at who's to blame, but the fact is that they're going to see no one wants to go to another election. Right. And they're going to look for the person who's going to be the savior. Lieberman can be that savior. So instead of looking at the blame, Yossi, people might look at who is the person who's the savior, and that could be something that could help them in whatever future election we'll have after this.
But I do believe, given the discrepancy, the big gap, and as you mentioned before, the kind of speech that he gave, which was very, very sort of, acid oriented towards, against the ultra-Orthodox parties, and even against Netanyahu. So, of course, it is in politics, everything, so we used to say, is possible, even if it is the art of impossible. But I think that publicly he has sort of cut himself into a corner from which he would not be able to come out without facing the danger of paying very highly in future elections. So I would not want to, maybe, I would like to kind of to meet you halfway, and not to say sealed and not to say doomed. But I think the likely of still forming a new government headed by Netanyahu, where Lieberman would be part of it, is very, very slim.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of polls now that start coming out, and if they do show that Lieberman's party in a third election, I mean, it's clear from many polls, the data is very clear, that Lieberman's voters in the September election are least likely to stay by him yet again. But if polls show he loses some seats, maybe...
But, okay, let's talk about it. It is not just the poll, you know, like it is not that we're holding a general poll to say, well, what do people think?
Sure.
What politicians do, they actually want to conduct polls addressed to their constituencies. So you've got to remember that many of the people who voted to Lieberman's, I mean, there was a big surprise. The people who were not associated with the right wing, those the people who just said, we don't want Netanyahu. And they came up, you know, and Lieberman, and say, hey, watch me, read my lips. I would not, you know, I want... And one way or another, I want to remove Netanyahu. So for him, vis-a-vis this constituency, that would be a very very high price to be paid should he enter a coalition government headed by Netanyahu.
You're shaking your head there.
I just disagree with Yossi here. I think that we have to recognize that a majority of Lieberman's voters are right-wing. And people who did not want Benjamin Netanyahu voted for Benny Gantz. They didn't vote for Victor Lieberman. I think we also have to look at the strategies that we're going to expect from Netanyahu and Gantz in these 21 days. Because when it comes down to it, Netanyahu and Gantz can go ahead and do a joint press conference on day number 20 of 21, and they can say, listen, Lieberman, it is up to you. Okay. We're telling you, choose one of us. Choose just one of us. If you don't, we're going to third election. The two of us together are saying it's your fault.
One thing that likely is going to happen between now and day 20 or day 21, a big development that will happen probably in the next few days, is the decision on the indictments. Does that change the game moving forward?
I'm not so sure we're going to have this, right? We have another unnamed source that says on Sunday or Monday we're going to have that. I'm not so sure that that's actually going to happen. I listened to the deputy state prosecutor who was on a different news medium last night, and based on what he said, he refused to confirm that this is something that's imminent. And based on my impression from listening to that interview, I do not expect it to be, you know, anytime soon. We might go ahead and go through this entire 21 days without this. And I've said this several times on your show. Gantz's entire strategy is based on the AG going ahead and indicting him. And if that doesn't happen, he's going to look really bad when we go to a third election.
But at the same time, you know, if charges being pressed against Netanyahu, it would be even much harder for Netanyahu to lure into his coalition government, say, votes that or seats or members of parliament that will not be expected to come to, you know, to his.
As Jeremy alluded to, there's been now 3 straight weeks where Israel's big networks, Channel 11, 12, or 13, they have reported that next week there'll be a final decision. This will be the 3rd week that if it doesn't come Sunday or Monday, that it hasn't happened.
Saying that, yeah, and still, well, first, we don't know whether it's going to be unfolded or not. We don't know that. But suppose it does. Suppose that
suppose it's going to be bribery even.
Yeah, suppose the general attorney, you know, comes up with a decision saying that, yes, I'm pressing charges against Netanyahu. Would you believe that it would not have any impact on the processes leading or not leading to third elections? I do believe that they would have some impact. And one of the impacts that I'm talking about, that it would be harder for Netanyahu to form a coalition government whereby he would try to attract to his government members of parliament that so far were not willing to come along, whether it would be from Lieberman's party or Lieberman himself.
Doesn't care. He said on record, and we heard him again today, he doesn't care if the prime minister is indicted.
Again,
that's not going to be what changes the needle and the thread for him.
Again, you know, I think at the end of the day, it's like your former previous comment is about the constituency. If indeed the constituency, as you see it, of Lieberman, would put pressure on him, and that he would understand that should he not join Netanyahu in the coalition government, that he's going to pay a big price in the next elections, of course that would be a game changer. Would that be? I'm not sure. This is where we are disagreeing with other on that point.
Jeremy, at this point, do you think most likely we're going to a third election, and it could, I mean, given the state of the deadlock, could there be even a fourth election? Could there be 2 full years possibly without a government in place?
I do think if we do have a third election, then yes, the likelihood is a fourth election, and that's exactly why we should not have a third election. But it's important to make a distinction between someone getting the third mandate in the 21 days and someone actually being successful in the third mandate in the 14 days that follow in forming a government. My prediction is that we will get someone who does get the third mandate. I'm just not so sure whoever gets the third mandate, whether that's Netanyahu, a dark horse candidate, or it's Gantz again, that's going to be a candidate that's going to be able to form a government.
We have to leave it here because we're coming up on the break. Jeremy, Saltan, Yossi Yonah, thank you so much for the discussion. Again, a historic and unprecedented time in Israeli politics with really no clear path forward to get a government together. Benny Gantz's mandate soon to expire, and really Wild West territory the next 3 weeks. Stay tuned to i24 News for more coverage.